everyone. Welcome to the Mufasa book reading. My name is Julia, and we are reading from Dr. Tineka Walfer's book, Authentic Leadership Effectiveness. Enjoy.
Chapter 10, Well-Known Leaders Through the Lens of Authentic Leadership. This chapter focuses on the South African context, as this is where I live. However, the intent of the following discussion is that it could be applied globally. I commence by examining the potential consequences when personal and professional authentic leadership is lacking. Through the lens of authentic leadership, I then focus on a study of two well-known, highly effective and influential leaders in the history of South Africa. Those being Helen Suzman, well-known political opposition leader who fought for equal human rights during the time of apartheid, and former President Nelson Mandela. What was it that these leaders did and did not do that made them so different from others, and that allowed them to be as effective and influential as they have been? This is followed by a comparison of the leadership authenticity of these two leaders. What happens when individual and collective authentic leadership is lacking? I remember once facilitating a leadership workshop with a very diverse group of middle management leaders, where I asked the following question to test their belief systems. Is man basically good or basically evil? The majority of the members believed that man was good, except for two members, one white and one black male. I state the race of these two members because this is South Africa we are talking about, the country in which the concept of apartheid, meaning the legal separation of races, was instituted in 1948. I was curious to learn more and asked both individuals the same question. How did you come to believe this? And how does this belief still empower you today? Because both of them believe that man was basically evil. So to answer the first question, is the white male stated that whilst growing up, his religion informed him of such, which means that man is basically evil. The black male stated that it was because of what he had experienced growing up in the time of apartheid. Both men answered me very boldly, and then I asked, how does this belief still empower you today? I noticed both men moving backwards in their seats as far as possible from the question I had asked them. Pondering on my question, both then realized for the first time that they still held on to a belief that was no longer, if ever, empowering. Had I never asked them of these questions, they would have both have continued to hold on to self-limiting beliefs. And as illustrated in this book, beliefs do inform behavior. It would be unusual to adopt any belief systems unless we have a positive intent for doing so at any moment in time. However, our circumstances often do change, and it does not always occur to us to re-examine these. Following is an example of a leader who always put the needs of others before her own. At work, this translated into her always helping others, even doing the work for them, when they asked for help, and she herself was continually under stress as she missed her own deadlines. In her coaching, we identified that she struggled with a sense of over-responsibility, resulting in taking inappropriate responsibility for others. We explored what might initially have informed a particular belief system that resulted in her behavior. Upon reflection, she backtracked to when she had lost her father when she was 10 years old. Her mother needed to become the breadwinner for the family, and as a result, at the age of 10, my client was told to take care of her 2-year-old sibling whenever she arrived home from school. She was given a responsibility that could be considered age inappropriate, and at that time, she had a positive intent in believing that she needed to put the needs of the 2-year-old sister before her. By doing so, she ensured that her sibling was taken care of, whilst managing to stay in favor with her mother. However, she never re-examined this belief system, and instead of it remaining helpful to her many years later, it has now become limiting and stressful, as those who replaced the 2-year-old sibling were adults who came to over-rely on her. Not only did she limit herself, she failed to empower them as well. Years ago, a professor of mine told us that there is no such thing as objectivity. The closest we could get to that was through collective subjectivity. This can play out in interesting ways, such as what we are experiencing, for instance, in South Africa today. Under the rule of apartheid, the four main groups of South Africans, comprising blacks, coloureds, kind of mixed race, Indians and whites, were separated in every way possible. We were not allowed to live, attend school, or travel on public transport together. We were also prohibited from loving or marrying across these divisions. After many years of apartheid, in 1994, South Africa finally became a democratic country. We were extremely fortunate to have at least 3 exceptional leaders at that time who navigated our country through the transition from a divided and restricted country to a country that could be allowed to become democratic and free. To this end, Helen Suzman, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and President Nelson Mandela played a huge role. Helen Suzman, for many years on her own, fought for equal human rights against the apartheid government in Parliament. After she retired from a political career, she served on the Human Rights Commission from 1995 to 1998. After 1994, Archbishop Desmond Tutu oversaw the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, whose purpose was to allow the perpetrators of injustice to come clean about their activities, and for those affected by those injustices to have the opportunity to understand, process, and if possible, to forgive. This process was intended to start the process of reconciliation so that we could move forward as a collective on a more democratic and free footing. Simultaneously, Nelson Mandela, having been very instrumental in the process that allowed South Africa to become democratic, became the first Black president of democratic South Africa. President Mandela chose to remain in power only for 1 term, during which he groomed his successor Thabo Mbeki to replace him once his term had ended. Mandela subsequently had an even bigger purpose to attend to, which was to start addressing the inequalities that remained in his country. This required strong leadership from him, and much of what he needed to and had achieved came not from his positional power, but rather from the influence that his inspirational presence generated. As a result, he influenced the private sector to get involved with developing much needed facilities such as schools and hospitals for the previously disadvantaged. Like Archbishop Tutu, he also did much work to build the metaphorical bridges required for forgiveness and reconciliation to take place between people of different races. Yet today, South Africa is not a happy country. 23 years into our democracy, it appears that racial prejudice is more rife than ever. At the midst of the political atmosphere under the presidential leadership of Jacob Zuma, it seems to be manifesting especially in the post-1994 born-free generation, who have completed their secondary schooling and who might now be at university to complete their tertiary education. This has played out especially in the tertiary education sector as frustrated young students embarked on the fees must fall protest, at times violent and continually disruptive to regular educational activities. In response to the government of the days, continually reduced financial support to education in South Africa. During these protests, whites have been blamed for all the ills that are still present in this country. Therefore, the transition from the apartheid era to a well-run democratic South Africa has yet to be perfected. Ferial Haffajee, editor-in-chief of the well-known South African newspaper publication City Press, in her recently published book, attempts to answer the question, quote, what if there were no whites in South Africa, unquote. An interesting question, the intent which leaves the readers guessing until they start reading. Haffajee points out that in 2014, whites constituted 8.4%, whereas blacks comprised over 80% of the total South African population. And yet, even though South Africa is currently ruled and run by a black government, there still appears to be white dominance in many respects, whether in culture, education, or the corporate world. She asks the question why. 22 years into our democracy, this is still so. She consulted Professor Melissa Steyn, the director of the Center for Diversity Studies at the University of Witwatersrand in Johannesburg. Prof. Melissa explained, quote, the two main ideological systems that we have constructed the whole of the modern world are white supremacy and patriarchy, end quote. Haffajee then suggests that even if they were to drive the entire 8.4% of white people into the sea, you still would not dismantle white supremacy, as white supremacy has become a figment in the mind of those who think so. Bearing in mind that there is no such thing as absolute objectivity and that the closest to this is collective subjectivity. This could mean the following. that not only do these ideological systems construct the whole modern world, these ideological systems themselves are constructed as well. Where else could this happen but in the minds of those who construct them? And we end the reading there.
Thank you so much for joining us in today's book reading. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share to your family and friends. Bye.